Let's move on because you have a couple of teams that you like to watch closely. One of them being the Kings, and I want you to talk a little bit about them because you've noticed some early trends, maybe not the best trends.
Yeah. So, disclosure: we usually watch the Leafs at like 7 o'clock, and then we'll pick up a 10:30 game, whether
Yeah.
it's Calgary or LA. So we do get to watch a lot more of these games than the average fan. Like the LA Kings are a team that I was rooting for. I've always been like a closeted LA fan.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I
They're-
like the
They're
organization.
easy to root for.
Yeah. And they were really good when we were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
This team was supposed to be very good out the gate. Like they were made the playoffs last year and not in a wild card spot. They got a lot better signing Kevin Fiala. Sean Durzi looks like he's taking another step. The reason why I bring up these two players is because there have been some weird things in these first two games from coaching that I want to talk about. Like, I don't want to be dramatic or anything, but those first two games were about as bad as it could get. As bad as it could get. They play a very dysfunctional Vegas Golden Knights team. I believe it was at home. They should have beat them because that team is still gelling. Game one, I think they were up 3-2, end up losing 4-3, even if they were tied 3-3, whatever it was. They were tied 3-3. And in the last few minutes of the game, Sean Durzi, albeit, gives up a really, really bad turnover that cost him the game, very similar to what Jake Muzzin did against the Montreal Canadiens. And then what happens is Todd McClellan proceeds to scratch him the next game. Now, one of the problems I have with that is there's one thing to bench a player for 2 minutes or maybe for a period because he makes a bad play and he's a young defenseman and you want to teach him. And maybe because it was the end of the game, he didn't have the opportunity to do that, so he scratches him. I really don't think scratching one of your better young defensemen, especially a guy that really stepped up to the plate with Drew Doughty out last year, I really don't think putting it in his head that one bad mistake is going to cost him a few games because now he might be way more reluctant to play.
Exactly.
I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on scratching a guy like that?
I think it's aggressive for the second game of the season, and all you want to do is keep things positive when you're not winning, and to do that, especially like you said, I think the point that you made is probably the most important point. What does that say to Sean Durzi?
Yeah.
He's a guy who wants to play with the puck. He's a pretty offensive defenseman, and if you're now showing him clearly that trying to make plays, albeit maybe not a smart play, will result in him getting benched or scratched even more so, like that's not what you want to be teaching a guy who has offensive potential. You learn by making mistakes, sure, but I would rather like encourage him to make plays rather than to like play very simple or not play his game, because that's not the player that he is.
I agree. It's very ostracizing
Yeah.
to put a guy in the press box. Like, it's different than benching a guy for 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe the next game, let him know he's going to sit the first period. That's one thing. A lot of fans don't see him being benched. Now every single fan knows that guy had to spend a few games in the press box. It also sends a message to the other guys on your team saying, don't make a mistake, because then the next one's going to be you. Like, it's one thing to put like a bad defenseman up there. Sean Durzi's their future, and he's playing big minutes. Like, he's playing 20, 25 minutes a night. Like, that's not
He's
even
good.
Like, he's a very good player. And to move on to the second game, like, things went from bad to worse. They played Seattle in game 2. That Seattle's up and coming, but they should win that game.
That should be a win.
They should win that game. Their newest addition, Kevin Fiala, came off a no-point, one-shot game in the first game. Comes into this game, I think, is a combined -2 by the third period. Has 2 shots on net. Literally a ghost out there. And then what does Todd McClellan do? Takes him off the first line. Takes him off the first power play at a point in the game where they still have a chance at coming back. And you know what? I understand if the guy isn't playing well, maybe you bench him at a time when you don't have an opportunity to come back to send a message. I get that. But these seem like so aggressive moves to make after 2 games in the season. You're sending a message to your young players that you better not make a mistake, you're going to be sitting. And you send a message to your big guys saying, if you aren't going up a point per game, you're not going to play on the first line power play. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like for Fiala's case, he's still learning to play with these 2 players. I think you need to give him a little bit of a rope here. You need to let him find his time to gel with these 2 new players. It's not easy. Even if you are making $8 million and you're expected to be a point a game, it's still new players, new situation, new system. It's going to take time. And like you said, if you're immediately punishing guys for not doing what you like, if you're having unrealistic expectations, or regardless, just punishing guys right off the hop, I don't think that sets like a great tone.
And not for nothing, the LA Kings know the type of player that Kevin Fiala is. Like
Yeah.
all Minnesota fans can like vouch for me on this. He's a better version or an equal version to William Nylander, such that if he doesn't score, he is going to be invisible.
Yeah.
That's just the type of player that he is. He will very quietly put up 75 to 85 points, averaging 2 shots a game with no hits and no blocks. Like that's the type of player that he is. So fine, if you want to change that player to be a more involved type of guy, that's fair. But you got to give him more than 2 games to do that. I don't know. These just seem like 2 head scratchers. If you're an LA Kings fan, I would be a little worried because if you want to start winning games, the last thing that you want is a lack of camaraderie between the players and the head coach.
Yeah, I think Todd McLellan's one of the not one of the few, but one of the older school coaches in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's sort of like that old school part of him coming out. But I think there's a time and place for that. I don't think the second game of the season is the place for that. I think 25 games into the season, when you're not playing the hockey you want to be playing, then send a message. But I think these guys need time, especially the younger players and especially the new guys. Another big market. Let's go all the way to the other side. New York. They've had a man. I had kind of like dragged the Rangers a lot last year because the underlying numbers suggested that they were a good offensive team who were porous defensively and had the best goalie in the last decade, at least like performance-wise for one season, and they were getting a little lucky, and that carried them all the way to the conference finals.
Which is true. That is what happened.
I think that was like a fair assessment, but they're still winning games, and they're winning them in incredible fashion. They're dominating the teams that they play. I know it's the second game of the season, but what have you seen from them early?
Yeah, we're going from a team that had high expectations that completely failed on it in the Kings to now one that had high expectations and are fulfilling it very well. I hate to say it, but the Rangers look like really, really
Real
good.
deal.
Really, really good. I don't like Jacob Trouba as a hockey player, but if they're like he is a big body,
He's huge.
very cliche, stay-at-home defenseman type of playoff guy that's mean. That like, albeit if he's gonna play big minutes, and on your other line you have Adam Fox, who's already won a Norris Trophy in his young career. It's a pretty good defensive, like a defensive system.
Keandre Miller too.
Yeah, Keandre Miller, and there's oh my God, I'm forgetting his name, but
Charlie Lindgren.
Yes, Lindgren, who
That's a great top 4.
Right, that's a very good top 4. They have the best goalie statistically in the last decade over 1 year, and offensively, holy moly,
they're loaded.
Do these guys look great? The biggest concerns that I had going into this year about the New York Rangers, I mean, starting from the playoffs last year, was number one, their lack of playoff experience. Like if they got bounced in the first round, they might turn into like a Leaf situation where these guys just don't develop in the playoffs. We know that that's gone, that the team went very deep and had a lot of playoff success. Number 2, whether Igor could back up what he did last year, and over the first 2 games that he played, looks like a brick wall. So we know that that's not just a blip, which, I mean, for a lot of people who might argue like, oh, how can you not think that Igor Shesterkin was great after last year? Like before that year where he got the starting job, he was never elite.
He was good, but he was always him and Georgiev splitting.
Exactly.
But last year he took it one step further. I think it's fair to expect hey, you had one great season. Can we see that again?
Exactly.
It looks like we're going to see something very similar to that.
So after 2 games, that red flag is gone. And then the last one is whether Chris Kreider can do what he did last year. Even 75% of that production is another good year for an aging Chris Kreider. And I mean, he's already scored in his first 2 games and looks nuts. Like a power forward.
He's a beast
type of player. I mean, the only thing the New York Rangers need left, I think, to develop more as a team is their young players like Lafreniere and Capo developing. And credit to Gerard Gallant, maybe we're thinking on the same wavelength. He's putting Capo Caco on that first line, and Alex Lafreniere is on that second line, playing beside very good players. I think Capo is playing beside Kreider and Zibanejad. Like, he's going to develop.
That's crazy.
Right? And if these types of players turn into, top 6 forwards, I mean, this team's a perennial cup favorite.
They were great last year without those 2 guys being, fantastic. And if they, like you said, if they become proper top 6 wingers, their team literally doesn't have a hole.
100%. They dominated Tampa in that first game. They dominated them. And then last night, we're filming on Saturday, by the way. This will be released Monday. So last night, they played the Winnipeg Jets. I watched that game. After the first, keep in mind, that is on a back-to-back where they were playing at home. They traveled.
3 and 4.
Right? They did 3 and 4. They didn't have Igor Shesterkin in the net. They're playing away. And And that team, they went down early, and in the second period, I think they outshot Winnipeg like 21-5 or 6 or something like that. I don't know how they didn't score. Connor Hellebuck had the game of his life.
He's my fantasy goalie.
They should have undoubtedly won that game. Like, they should have scored 3 goals in that second period. Like, regardless, like, this team looks good.
They do. And we also missed the little game they had the night before. They dummied the Wild when your boy Matt Boldy scored a sick goal. Did you see that, like, backhand toe drag?
Like, from behind, and then behind the net he finishes it.
Disgusting. This Rangers team, they're legit and they're scary. And I clowned them I didn't clown them. They clowned me, if anything. But, like, I was hard on them last year. I think that might change. I think they're kind of the real deal now.
Yeah, if I had to update, like, a way too early power rankings, the New York Rangers are in my top 3. I think they have to be.
I think you'd be well within your rights to put them there.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content, and find the link to our full podcast and all our socials in the description down below.
Also, don't forget to turn on those notifications to get live updates on new videos that we release.